camaraderie, brotherhood, common mission. These things are understood by all who serve, but after service, they can be hard to find in civilian life. For many veterans, reconnecting to that civilian world is the hardest challenge they have ever faced. Stay with us as we discuss veterans and social isolation. Thanks for tuning in to Veterans Voices. I'm Nathan Johnson, and tonight we will be talking about veterans and social isolation. If you want to be part of the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. To begin our panel, I want to welcome Navy veteran Jet Garner and Team Rubicon program leader Michael Davison to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Proud to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Jet, welcome back to the show, and Michael, welcome. We've had Team Rubicon on the show before, but I don't think we've ever had you as a guest. Tonight, we are talking about a very difficult conversation, social isolation. I know for some veterans, social isolation is not necessarily a problem. It's more of a choice in how they want to live their life. But for some veterans who struggle to transition out of the military and reintegrate back into society, social isolation may be somewhat of a symptom of the overall problem. But gentlemen, give us a little bit, real quickly, your background in the military. I know you both served in the Navy. Michael, give us a little bit more of a summary of your service in the military.
Sure. I was in the Navy for 23 years, 10 of which enlisted, 13 of which as an officer, most of it on submarines, one anomaly tour over into a landlocked country called Afghanistan. I got out in 2012, and, went to work for went on the typical road for veterans and went to work for a defense contractor. That ended horribly, and then eventually found my way to happiness, and that is with Team Rubicon and managing the Clay Hunt Fellows program.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight. We look forward to talking to you more.
Portland, Oregon.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Jet, welcome back. You served in the Navy as well. Tell our audience a little bit more about your military service.
Yeah, sure. So I was a Fleet Marine Force corpsman for 4.5 years for 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. So I was stationed out in Marine Corps Base, Hawaii. A lot of people say that that's just an awful station. How did I ever survive? So as a medic, I did 2 different tours, one in 2009, one in 2010. Short version is I got blown up a lot. I got shot the one time, and afterwards I went to college and then started doing all of my nature things, which we're going to be talking about on the show.
Absolutely. So let's dive into this. I think, Jet, to be honest with you, this topic was partly inspired by our last conversation after the show, in which you mentioned a lot about how you had ventured out into the wilderness somewhat on a journey of your own.
Yeah, so I was flattered when Ray called me, and it was actually like, yeah, so some things that I said supposedly resonated with a lot of people, and that's really cool. Like, I think that's great. That's what all this is about, and I can only hope to replicate those things. So more or less, again, I'm going to try to be concise. My journey was, war, and immediately college for 5 years, and I went on the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a 2,600-mile footpath from Mexico to Canada. I thought that seemed like a cool idea. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be, and I was out there thinking I was trying to decide between 2 different professions, and I ended up breaking down walls that I didn't even know existed inside my head, just issues that I had, anger, and where it all comes from, for me at least. And I grew profoundly on that trip. And afterwards, I was just doing my very best to try to, pay that forward and to tell other veterans and anybody with trauma, like, how to do that and, like, facilitate it in any way I could. And there is a dovetail between socialization and isolation involved in that activity. And I think the balance is extremely powerful.
Michael, do you have a similar experience to Jet? I think, I don't want to confuse the topic that social isolation just means, existing in some type of rural setting. Sometimes social isolation can be right here in an urban setting. But help us understand a little bit how this topic relates to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jet, you and I need to talk, because I got some thoughts about the PCT. But I would say that my journey was a little bit different. I retired on September 30th, went to work for a government contractor on October 1st. And October 1st was when the first time I had a panic attack. Being in that environment, being outside of uniform. I mean, I've been in uniform for 23 years, and now I'm in an Aloha shirt and some khakis at US Paycom, and not a groovy experience for me. And it got to the point where I started spending my lunch hours in my truck crying because I was so miserable. It got to the point where I started having ideation about checking out, and luckily enough, some stuff turned around and some people got in the hole with me, and here I am today, 10 years later.
Yeah, so for me, so I didn't do anything near 20 years. I did 4.5, when I talk to guys like you that wore the uniform for more than 20 years, it kind of blows my mind, honestly. I had a quick flash. My military service was like a flash. It was not a long or slow burn type of thing. I've talked with a lot of guys that have similar stories to you, for better and for worse. After you take off the uniform, what am I doing now? What do I do? And again, back to what Nathan mentioned, you'd be totally alone in a city. And honestly, alone in a city is the worst. If you're off middle of nowhere and you're alone on purpose, solitude can be very growthful. If you're alone in a crowded room, it sucks. It does suck. And I've literally talked to friends in their truck. It's not even cliche, man. It's a thing. I've actually had friends call that were in their truck while it was pouring down rain with a gun and said, why? Why should I keep living? Why should I keep going? And at the end of the day, I suppose that was always my job for them. I used to rescue people, and I guess they still ask. They still do that to this day. They still do it. And the only thing I have, all I have for them is if you just make it through one set of waves, when the sun rises, you'll feel better, and you will, and it's a thing. So what do you think made you so sad about taking off the uniform? What do you think? Asking you.
Yeah, I would say first off, it's loss of identity. Second, it'd be loss of community.
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful, visual representations of what PTS really translates into is a scene out of The Hurt Locker with Jeremy Renner, when he's back stateside and in a grocery store trying to pick out cereal for his kid. And too many options, just overwhelmed with this like going from a combat zone 24 hours prior to, I got to pick out cereal. There is no homecoming for veterans. There is just here's your fucking dick. Oh, I'm sorry, I just dropped an F-bomb.
You're fine. I think that you're fine. It's an adult show.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
You're fine. Please continue.
We just, we're just like, hey, here's your ticket home. Best of luck. You're going to go back home and you're going to be in a community where, I don't know, maybe 1% of your community is also served. So no one's going to get you. You're going to have like all these ideas and thoughts going on. No one's going to understand it. So who do you lean on? Who do you lean into? Your tribe's gone. And that's what you depend on for your safety.
Mm-hmm. I would say your tribe isn't gone, but they vanish.
They've gone over the horizon. Like, they're no longer right next to you.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, you're absolutely right. People... So I had this weird concept a long time ago that is extremely pertinent, and I still do it to myself. So, when you join the military, right? You join the military, and they say, oh, you're going to do 4 years. Okay, sweet, great. And they put you somewhere. And then you spend those 4 years, well, frankly, 3 of them, but that's irrelevant. You spend 4 of them with the same people, right? And then eventually they cut you new orders, and it's a whole new set of people. Like that chain, like that thing that you poured yourself into, you loved, you fought for, all of it, it's gone. And you got to do it again. And they make you do this over and over and over and over, and that's the cycle, like that's the thing. And military folks, from my experience, we do it in relationships, we do it in friendships, we do it in every form of social contract where we are. It's kind of like socially spinning your wheels. It really is. And they evaporate. And like, even though, yeah, you know that person exists, you know that they're still there somewhere, you know that they're out there doing their thing, but they left you. Like, it's gone. And we get extremely comfortable, which is part of the problem. We get very comfortable with that detachment. And I think that is sort of the source of a lot of the stuff that we have problems with, is because we're just spinning our wheels so many times. And this turns into nobody wants to get deep. Nobody wants to, like, you don't want to get like close to this person.
Jet, I want to get deep.
Because you're so,
I want to get deep. You just said,
I hear you.
They left me. They left me. When in actuality, it's like, the way at least I felt is I left them.
And we are taught. I don't care what branch. I mean, here we both were Navy, but it doesn't matter what branch. Everybody says the same thing. We were taught to never leave anybody behind, right? That was the thing. That's what's supposed to happen. But then, so another side of this is that people move on. They move on with their lives. And some of us get left behind. I've never had a family. I've never been married. I don't have any children. So many of my friends get married, have children, do the thing, the American nightmare. I've seen so many of them do it. And sometimes I miss, sometimes I crave it, and sometimes I just don't understand it. I think frequently I just don't understand it. They left me behind. It's exactly like you're describing. And what we need to do is to learn to pick a new direction, pick a new calling. I think that's extremely important. Having lack of direction is the worst thing in the world, I think. And here, talk about, wearing a uniform for 20 years. I think that it could be really difficult to, change course. Right? I mean, come on, this is natural. That makes sense. It makes sense that it's hard to change course, to pick a new passion, pick a new thing,
What do you suggest there, Jet, in terms of, I mean, we don't want to quickly move past this very real conversation, but when you're saying we need to pick a new path, when we feel a lot of sense of loss and guilt of leaving others behind, and it sounds like also feeling unique and that a lot of others don't really share in the experiences that we've shared in. What do you mean by we need to pick a new path? Because for some veterans, I know that path means the only thing they can choose is to actually go back in. But I don't think you're sensing, or not sensing, I don't think you're suggesting that as a path necessarily.
So I'm actively dealing with that with one of my best friends. He is obsessed with trying to just go back, He's and at his point in life, he's probably not going back, but he's obsessed with this contract role, just the same thing. Like in his mind, in our minds, it tends to be the same thing. And I want to mention, like Mike's mentioned on identity. I think it is linked to this identity thing, and I am suggesting something different than that. I definitely am. I am more thinking about reinventing yourself. I am thinking about, the war is over. There's always going to be a war, but our war, it's over. And you gotta do something with yourself besides think about going to a war that is no longer around. It's not the 80s, it's not the 90s, it's not the 2000s. It's over. And so reinventing yourself and changing your identity, you're still the same person. You're still a vet. You're still a combat hero. We all know, and everybody knows. And I think this new direction that I talk about, it's hobbies, it's new passions. Idle hands, are the quote unquote devil's playground. We all know that. And I think that most folks get into trouble when they just have nothing to do. I think that managing to find something that you care about, not a job. Jobs are great. Jobs are cool. If that gives you purpose, fantastic. What's better than a job is that you do something that matters to you, and you do it for fun. You do it because you want to. And it's also healthy. I mean, the reason I got into long distance backpacking was I thought I was just going to be choosing between a couple of different career paths. And it changed my entire life, and I've never gone back. And I never will. It's done. You can't unsee it.
Yeah.
After you find that passion. Yes. Go on, Nathan.
No, the interesting thing that I remember from our conversation in the previous show is when you actually went out on these backpacking expeditions, and Michael, you may relate to something like this, when you sought out social isolation, what you ended up doing was actually connecting with people who were having that similar experience that you were having. I think we have just about 60 seconds before the end of the segment, but your thoughts on that, Michael or Jet?
You got anything, Michael?
Yeah, man. Jet, if you don't mind, I'll chime in.
Hell yeah.
What I think you're talking about is just the fucking ultimate. There I go with another F-bomb. With the ultimate Venn diagram, and that's you got strengths and you got passion, right? And that's what we're searching for is where we can get those two circles concentric, and whether it means going into government contracts, and maybe that means going on the Pacific Coast Trail. Whatever it means, you're finding your strengths and your passions, you're trying to get those circles together. And I think that is where, we, as, transitioned veterans can help better, those folks that are following behind us in their transition, is to help them identify, what are their strengths, what are their passions, and let's help them, bring that Venn diagram together.
We're getting some comments here from our audience, so I just want to say, Jet and Michael, what you're saying is really ringing true with our audience who's listening. So, and we'll get to some of these comments in our third segment. Gentlemen, thank you so much for getting this conversation started. We've gotten into the real depth of social isolation. What is behind it? How does it bring people into even feeling alone when they're surrounded by others. When we come back, we will continue this very important conversation on Veterans Voices and the topic of veterans and social isolation. First, we want to take a moment to honor the service of veteran Julian Brand in this month's Shadowbox segment. Tonight's Shadowbox belongs to Julian Brand. Julian served in the Air Force from 2009 to 2020. He holds an active secret clearance and has 7 years of proven experience in human resources. He is currently living in Parker, Colorado, and is attending Golden Gate University, where he is working towards obtaining his bachelor's degree. We honor his service. All right, we're talking about veterans and social isolation. Do you want to be a part of our conversation? We'd love to have your input. We're getting comments. I'm reading them as the show's happening. If you want to be part of tonight's conversation, call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. We had a fantastic first segment, but now I want to welcome Jeff Jewell, the former director of the Contra Vet Center, and Harry Hitchings. We call him Hitch. He's the Veteran Service Officer from Modoc County. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show.
Thank you for having me, Nathan. Semper Fi.
All right.
Yeah, glad to be here, Nathan. Great to see you again.
Good to see you both as well. I've known and worked with you for several years. Both of you are veterans, Air Force and Marine Corps, but I want to get your perspective not only as veterans, because I think you can relate to the topics that were discussed in segment 1, but a lot of difficulty in finding something that was relevant and significant, a lot of difficulty in relating to others, a lot of feelings of loss and guilt in regards to being left or feeling like you left others, and an overall hope that we could find a new path in this transition out of the military. Gentlemen, how can you pick up in this conversation from your perspectives?
Hitch, is it all right if I go first?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, jump in there anytime. I just wanted to listening to these two, Jet and Michael, one of the things that I really think we need to talk about a little bit is what are some of these challenges that veterans face when they come back, that helps them to perpetuate, this whole feeling of being isolated, and one of the things we have to really recognize is that, and I think every veteran out there should know this, is that, that veterans view the world differently because of their experiences, and especially if they're combat veterans. And they have a different view of the world than they had before they went in. And then when they come back and everybody wants everything to be normal again, they're going, wait a minute, what is normal? And so they have all these questions, and they have a difficult time managing their expectations, hard time letting themselves feel. I used, when I was a therapist at the Contra Vet Center and in Sacramento and in Oakland, I would always, hear things like, I am having a hard time letting myself feel. I'm having a hard time connecting with old friends. I don't have anything in common with them anymore. What should I do today? How do I survive? Harry, what do you think? What do you see up there in Modoc County?
Well, Jet had a great thing that he said. He says, you can be in a room full of people and feel alone. But for me, I think they come up here because it's rural geographical isolation as well. And when you look at the overall umbrella of post-traumatic stress symptoms, me and my fellow veterans up here, we kind of joke about it. The last one normally to go from anxiety, depression, sleepless disorders, it's called hypervigilance. And hypervigilance means, you're still trying to process all the incoming data, sights, sounds, smells, all that. And there's not as much of that up here. Birds, the wind, some cattle. We have one four-way stop with a blinking light out of 11 communities in this 4,100 square miles. So there's not much even road rage or traffic, because believe it or not, rat race traffic can trigger hypervigilance extremely quickly. So they move here because they can process all that data so much easier. They keep their circle small. They do have the ability to stay in touch with family that's not local, but overall, they don't have to deal with this much. And like Jet said, the solitude, the peace and quiet, it's very appealing for most of them. The veterans, the wives, on the other hand, they don't care for this place very much. It's less than 2 people per square mile, not a whole lot to do. But they do notice how when they come up here, the wives notice that they do improve. Unfortunately, the challenges of rurally, geographically isolating yourself is you're taking yourself further away from those resources, such as the vet centers, which are a lot more informal, or the white coats at the main big VA hospital that they should be helping. And I've got a large population of Vietnam veterans up here, and they came here for specifically that reason: the wide open spaces, a lot less stress.
Hey, Hitch,
You know?
I'm wondering if since you have a large population of Vietnam veterans, one of the things that I found is that, have you tried working some kind of a buddy system where you can have these folks checking in on each other?
Oh yeah, and they do. I mean, before I even got here, I've been here coming on 14 years. Before I even got here, they found each other, and I still got a couple hardliners that bear a big grudge to the VA, and I've helped their friends. Whether it was disability or got them enrolled for health care, and they're improving and getting better because their wife drug them in my office, and I convinced them the VA ain't what it was 30 years ago. They tell their friends at the gas station or across the fence or at the post office, hey, go see Harry. The VA's changed, man. They're taking good care of me. And that's the first thing they say: screw them bastards. I ain't never going back.
Yeah.
And I try to tell them, those people that said there's no such thing as Agent Orange or PTSD, they're dead or retired. So it's tough trying to get up out of that deep brush and come back and get some help.
Yeah. We're trying to quiet down the dogs in the background here. All right. So, hey, listen, Hitch, I'm wondering, when you talk about the buddy system, have you ever thought about maybe setting up a group of folks to work with them on how to communicate with each other and the things to say and not to say in the buddy system?
Yes. In fact, for the last 2 years, I'm a member of the Modoc County Behavioral Health Advisory Board. And because we're so rurally isolated, I offer the veterans perspective. And our behavioral health department at county is great. They reached out to the VA. We fall under the jurisdiction of Reno, by the way. But they reached out to the behavioral health department in Reno, VA. And they've got several LCSWs that are specifically veteran trained now. So when those sheriffs encounter that veteran in crisis at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, they know that they don't have to worry about getting them all the way to the VA. They can get them to behavioral health and help them through that crisis. However, that's the trade-off. When you rurally geographically isolate yourself, such as they have chosen to do, and taking themselves away from those resources, you got more time to think. You don't keep taking your medications, and there's not a lot of distractions. We have 7-month winters up here. It's snowing outside right now, but so you're almost verge of cabin fever. You know what I mean? They don't get out as much. But we do our buddy checks. The small rural posts, the veterans, VFW, American Legion posts we have, we get together once a month, if not more. And believe it or not, we have a small military honors detail between the two posts, enough able-bodied guys.
That's a great way to get everybody out, to have
And
some kind of an honor
I've got
guard.
several that they won't come to a meeting, but if I call them and say, hey man, I need a shooter on the firing detail, or I need somebody to help me pull the flag, they're there. So it still means to them. You know what I mean?
So you're thinking outside the box.
Well, I got to get them in somehow, And the big thing is, though, the spouses. My cutoff in my office is 55 age. I ask them, do you have a computer? Do you have a smartphone? If not, because the VA is pushing all this tech, go to this website, go download this app. These guys can barely operate a flip phone. They want somebody to talk to face to face. They don't, they can't even turn on a computer. But that's the way the VA is going. So to keep it old school, I still try to say, hey, the guy's name is such and such. Here's his phone number. I'll tell you where his office is, and if you need to go get a problem taken care of, or whatever, talk to him.
Hitch, I want to stop you for a second and ask if you can elaborate a little bit more, because this is an interesting change in this conversation, how technology can actually facilitate social isolation. So give our audience a little bit better understanding of how folks in rural areas or of a particular age, you said over 55, how the lack of availability or familiarity with technology is leading to this social isolation.
That's an estimation on my part, Nathan. I apologize. I just turned 64, okay? But I can turn on a computer. I can enter data. I can store it. I can retrieve it. I can generate an email. I'm fortunate because my training in the military allowed me to enter the 21st century tech-wise. But there is 2 to 3 full generations of veterans out there that are not that tech-savvy. So we have to work around it, because that's the first thing the VA does is go to this website or just download the app. And you're like,
and the veterans feel that it's impersonal.
Exactly.
I've often had veterans tell me how frustrated they were because they were told they had to go to an app or check or email something rather than actually being able to talk to someone face to face.
It's very presumptive on the part of the Veterans Administration to assume. We all know what happens when you assume. To assume that everyone has a computer, smartphone, and access to a decent bandwidth internet.
Well, so here's the problem, Hitch. Here's the big problem you got. It's perpetuated by the whole pandemic, and now in this post-pandemic period that we're in, folks are really struggling. But it's unfortunate that the VA and a lot of they're relying more and more on technology, when a lot of these veterans, what they want is they want a face-to-face meeting. They don't want to be doing telehealth or speaking to somebody on the phone. They would rather be in some type of face-to-face, either in a group, and we're still playing catch-up in the whole post-pandemic world with this.
Let me throw this real quick before Nathan. I took the job in 2008. In 2009, the Veterans Healthcare Administration announced they were creating a 4th category. The Veterans Office of Rural Health has urban, rural, and very rural. And I shot my hand up and I said, what's very rural? And they said, 7 people or less per square mile. Well, the 2010 census, they discovered that 47% of all veterans nationwide, on average, live more than 100 miles from an EVA. They've gone away from them. So they created what's called isolated veterans. And they've done everything they possibly can to include non-VA community care. And I have several veterans who worked it out, got authorized community care, and they get their counseling right there in town. They're not driving for 2.5 hours to go see a white coat. And they're happy with it.
Yeah. Wow, Nathan, we got a lot to talk about with these guys.
And what's interesting, from what I'm hearing from this, is those who actually seek out to live in a rural area actually seek to be connected to other people. It's not that they don't like people. They like people. They want that face-to-face versus technology, and they're much more willing to be connected to their community through VFWs and honor guards and such than maybe some of the folks here in the urban areas. What I'm hearing is social isolation is not necessarily a dislike of other people, but maybe a overstimulation that is occurring from this very hectic, confusing.
I was going to use the word stress. Stress is a generalized term, but stress is everything. It's data input, data overload. The stress of city life, vice a 2-lane country road. That type of thing.
Yeah, Jeff, what are you familiar with in that regard? The overstimulation that's occurring with the combination of social media and technology and just really crowded urban environments, and how veterans may try to get away from that, but not necessarily to get away from people.
Yeah, exactly. I will say that I had a lot of veterans come to my office and say, hey, I need to get out of the rat race of the Bay Area. I'm moving to Idaho or I'm moving to Utah. And I would always caution them, hey, let's, there's an old saying that, your problems are going to follow you wherever you go. So what you really want to do is be able to focus on what the problems really are, and try not to take that baggage with you. But if you're going for the right reasons, and if you're comfortable, like these two, like Michael and especially Jet, if you really know yourself and know that nature maybe is your thing, and that being in an area where there's less sensory things going on, because we're talking about, and Harry alluded to it, all the five senses, and any one of them can trigger, a flashback or something like that. So, it's just, if you want to go to a rural area, know the reasons why you're there and try and work within that. And then one of the things you're really looking for is that face-to-face, and that and the technology, you could care less. Yeah.
Say a little bit more, Jeff, about how you have facilitated, we only have about 2 minutes, how you have facilitated intentional, organized groups to help folks stay connected to each other. You were suggesting something like that to Hitch a few minutes ago.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in my career in the VA, I always tried to think outside of the box. And one of the things that I always fought for was taking these trips up to Lake Tahoe. And I would take a whole group of veterans for like 2 or 3 days. And we would rent the Coast Guard had some condos up in Lake Tahoe, and we would get a condo and just to get these guys away from a little bit, and the Bay Area, allow them to go out and just take walks and just have a conversation without a car horn blaring or kids screaming, and it was it was hugely successful. Having these groups go into kind of an area where there was some quiet, where they could just kick back and you know what, have good food, good conversation, not really have to worry about, what you're going to do 1 minute from the next. You could do whatever you wanted to.
A retreat of some sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very successful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I'm glad that the two of you could come on and share your perspectives as veterans, but also as your perspective as providers, and how communities within your circles have faced issues like social isolation. I want to point out, a couple of our comments from our audience, and thank you so much for tuning into this conversation tonight. One comment here is, you've got to find a new identity. Got to evolve into something new. And Gene Anderson, thank you for watching, Gene. Gene just simply says, good stuff, and I agree. This is a very important conversation, and I'm looking forward to our next segment. When we return, we will conclude our conversation about social isolation with the entire panel and answer all of your viewer questions. Stay tuned.
Fear, shock, disbelief. I don't believe this has happened to me. What do I do now? How can I go on? These are common messages we hear from service members and their families across our nation. The health-related crises, influx of racial and social injustice, and the economic instability our country is facing are just a few of the factors that have greatly increased the mental health needs throughout the country. Given Hour is a national nonprofit that provides access to mental health care across the nation. Through a national network of licensed mental health providers, Given Hour offers mental health care to active duty, National Guard and Reserve, veterans, and their loved ones. Our providers do this by offering to regularly give an hour of their time to eliminate barriers to mental health counseling. We have service members that have sacrificed some, and then we have service members that have sacrificed all. Now it's our turn to take care of them, together. As a reminder, Given Hour does not provide emergency services. For immediate help, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Veterans, press 1 or text SIGNS to 741-741 for the crisis text line. Both services are free and available 24/7.
We are having a great conversation tonight. We're talking about veterans and social isolation. We want to welcome you to contact us right now with your questions, your comments. We want to hear from you on how has social isolation affected you as a veteran or someone you know. Call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook, like many of you have tonight, at Veterans Voices 1, or email us, veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. We've got our entire panel back. We've got Jet and Michael and Jeff and Hitch back on the show. And I want to bring up one of our viewer questions. How do you approach a vet who you know is socially isolated to encourage them to seek out more social interaction? So how do you approach someone who you feel like their social isolation may be a limiting factor, and you want to help them, you want to encourage them to interact more, maybe establish some of those deeper relationships that, Jet, you mentioned we're incapable of as veterans?
You know, oh no, is that Jeff? Go on, Jeff.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I'd have to say to that viewer is, one of the things you got to really work hard at is you can't pass judgment on somebody. You have to kind of accept them for who they are, and sometimes you got to know when you can, when you got to be able to stop prying at just at the right time. You can pry too much, and be careful not to offer. I know with the internet and everything out there, and there's so much information out there, you got to be really careful not to offer some type of a clinical diagnosis. Leave that to the professionals. The best thing you could do for your friend is, to get them to open up and see if they might be willing to seek some professional help or therapy or talk to someone else, and so that, it's a real hard balance, and sometimes you have to know when to stop talking, which is what I'm going to do right now, and just listen.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Others?
So I definitely wanted to point out, for one, something he was saying that I liked, something that Jeff said. Learning to shut up is an extremely important skill. It's a big deal, especially for all of us that like to talk. Talking is great, but learning to listen is the kind of skill that is harder to master than it is to talk. Talking is more easily mastered. The other thing that I would say about, actually approaching someone who, say, isn't having the best day, or maybe they are socially isolated, invite them to do things. Invite them to do things, but make it low key. It's not a concert. We're not going to go and see Bruno freaking Mars. It's a walk. It's a sandwich. Have a clear beginning and have a clear end. Yeah. Those are the types of things that I think that social anxiety folks really need, is they also want it to end. They don't want it to, they don't necessarily want 6 months in the woods with you. They might just want a sandwich.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, I had a question for you. I think the audience might really be curious. I know I am. I was really listening to you, Michael, when you were talking. And one of the things you said was that you had a bunch of people jump in the hole with you when you were really down and really low. And so I'd be curious. Tell me about those. What were those people like that jumped in that hole with you? In other words, they came to your rescue in that dark place, and what did they do to get you out of that, yourself?
Good question for Michael, Jeff. And before Michael responds, there we go. He's got his microphone turned back on now. Michael?
Yeah, okay, so Jeff, I wrote down some notes as we were all talking, and one of the things, Jeff, you said, there's a difference in experience of combat veterans and non-combat veterans. Mm-hmm. Yeah, first off, I'd push back on that.
Okay. Yeah,
like,
that's
I
fair.
mean,
That's fair.
I mean, you look at, like, I think it's something crazy. Like, I haven't looked at the latest statistics, but like 70% of like PTS cases never saw combat.
Yeah. Well,
So, so that's an issue there. So, like, what is happening to bring that traumatic stress, right? And I think it's loss of community, it's loss of purpose, it's loss of identity. We're pulling that out of people, and not giving them somewhere to go. And
I think something that
talk to me, Jet. Go.
Something I think you're touching on, cool. Something that doesn't require combat, right? Something that doesn't require combat is all veterans feel trapped. It doesn't matter if they're in combat. It doesn't matter if they're on a ship. It doesn't matter if they're on a submarine. It doesn't matter if they're in a fucking tank. All vets feel trapped. A bit, more elbow room would always be nicer. And I think that's the kind of thing that you're touching on. I think it is extremely important. I've done my best as I happen to be a combat vet. Great, fun. But I do try to include non-combat vets because it is a problem and it is a big deal. And all veterans, every single person who's ever served has been yelled at, screamed at, trapped, forced to do all kinds of stuff. And I think that is the kind of thing that Michael is touching on, and I think that it's a powerful thing to digest. I think that's
So.
it's
I do want to still swing back to Michael. So tell me about those folks that jumped in the hole with you, and how did they get you out of it, Michael?
Yeah, I would say that, like, they got there with, like, empathy. They got there with love and non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't tell me how to get out.
Mm-hmm.
They just got in there and just stayed there with me.
Hey, very good, very good. And I'm wondering, you mentioned this new tribe, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around that. Is what does that new tribe look like for both you and Jet? Jet, for you and Michael, maybe both of you can answer that question. What does that new tribe look like, and what do you want it to be?
Well, Jet, you go first, man. I
want me to go first?
Yeah, man, go for it.
I'll go first.
Right on.
My new tribe, what does that look like? I think my new tribe is international citizen. I think that it is humanity. But granted, those are huge. I get that. That's like really, really big stuff. But the reason that I say that, and the reason that is my answer, is because after the war, let's go back for a second. Let's go back to it. The people who taught me humanity were the Afghans. The Afghan people taught me humanity. I was an angry punk rock piece of shit until I went to war. And as a medic in that war, what I learned is that people are all the same. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I think that glass half full attitude goes a long freaking way. I learned that a lot of the people that were locals, or a lot of people that I got to know that were Afghans, I think that those motherfuckers, those are the people that really taught me what the human race is capable of and how sweet they can be. So fast forward, I'm a global citizen. Why? Why is that my answer? Because other cultures and the other and understanding and empathizing with those things are exactly what prevents war. That's why. Like, it changes your entire perspective on things. It changes how things are, changes who you'll be, who you'll become. It changes all of those things.
I want to
That might be
interject,
for me.
if I may, just
I
because
like
this
it.
segment particularly is to involve our audience. So I like the conversation that's happening, and I hate to interrupt, but I want to read a couple
You're fine.
comments here. One of our viewers says, Michael, speaking wisdom. I hear this guy. Thank you, Michael. Matthew, thanks for watching, Matthew. I'd get a sandwich with Jet any day of the week. Right on. All right, Matthew. But here's a question, though. How do you think the culture within the military has an influence on non-combat veterans with PTSD? So we're kind of going back to the topic of not being specific to combat, but post-traumatic stress. How do you think the
Dude,
culture
I'll
within the
just chime
military
in,
has
like,
an influence
immediately.
on
It
veterans
has
with
no
PTSD?
difference. It has no difference.
Agreed.
We will not say that we suffer from PTSD regardless of combat or non-combat. We will not say that as a service member because we know that will denigrate like our ability to do our job.
I
And
agree.
As,
It's very-
as
it's very
people
small.
that signed up and said like I will suck a bullet for this country, they're not willing to say like I'm incapable of that. And the first thing that will get you out of that fight is to say like I'm not feeling well mentally.
Mm-hmm.
We're not
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to do it.
Everything you just said is entirely correct.
Yeah.
Hey, Hitch, you look like you got something you need to say there, Hitch.
Yeah, back to tribes. My tribes now is my veterans. I stay in touch with guys that served under me, and they're retiring now. And the most famous saying is, "I miss the clowns, but not the circus."
Oh, that's a
those
good one.
Those
That's
people
brilliant.
around you,
I love
those
it.
people around you were your family. Whether you're on a sub, whether you're on a firearm battery, whether you're sleeping in a hole in the ground, doesn't matter. They got you through it. You got them through it. That's your family. But now when that family is removed and they've all gone on with their lives, those things you talked about around the smoke pit, they expect you to carry through. Are you going to college? Are you going to find a sweetheart? Are you going to build a family? Stay to it, because that was your dream. That's what got you through everything. You know, the cold, the heat, the fear, all that. But in regards to the post-traumatic stress, Mike, I'm with you, brother. I see a very small percentage, probably 1% of the veteran community, just like with inter-service rivalries, you know, between the Army and the Navy and all that. The combat action ribbons and the combat action badges and the pogues, you know, it goes and it comes and it weighs. I don't put any weight in that because I've seen too many of them in the past with claims. The VA would deny this guy, you know, from Vietnam. Like, you did your year in Vietnam, but you were a supply clerk. How can he be traumatized? So you got to turn around and tell him, you know what the collateral duty for a supply clerk was in Vietnam? Graves registration. Do you know what Graves
Wow.
registration is? Then you have to explain to the VA
Hey, Hitch, I will tell you one of the
what
toughest
he did.
things.
You know what I mean?
in
That's why he's traumatized. He had a box of his buddy's stuff. They don't see that on a
I
DVD.
served in a counter ID task force in Afghanistan. I was a J4. I was the logs officer. Toughest thing I had to do over there was pack up the belongings
Yep.
of folks that got blown up by an IED.
And that's not in your service
And
record.
I never unholstered my weapon the entire time I was spent over there in Afghanistan. But I would guarantee you, I have PTS. And it's
Oh, yeah.
because I packed up that individual's belongings. I had to go through that. I just sanitized it. It was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
It's
There-
hard stuff.
There are people that did 15 months in Afghanistan, no combat action badge, no combat action ribbon, no Purple Heart, but they got post-traumatic stress, and they still can't drive down a road without freaking out with a bag of garbage on the side of the road.
So
They don't
what
get
we're
it.
finding here is that social isolation, strong correlation to post-traumatic stress, which doesn't necessarily have a correlation to whether you saw any combat or not, just the experience of
Correct.
serving in the military and how rigorous
Correct.
that experience could be. Gentlemen, we got about 45 seconds. Final thoughts on this topic for tonight for our audience.
Be a good listener.
Thank you, Jeff.
You know,
Be a good
Just be a
listener.
good listener.
Be a good listener. Okay, no judge
my
anymore.
mind-
Jet, I have a feeling we've got
get
some
curious.
fans here. Your
Get
final
curious
words.
and ask questions.
Fine. My 2 cents are balance. You know, social isolation is only healthy if you also socially, manage to mingle. I think that's extremely important. Balance is key.
Fantastic.
In my office,
Gentlemen,
I listen when I talk.
okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. I wish we could continue this conversation, and I have a feeling after the show, we'll have an after-show conversation, so look for that on Facebook. But this concludes our panel discussion. A little later, we will have a list of resources for veterans to help combat social isolation. But first, we want to dedicate this show to the memory of Mickey Ganitch, Pearl Harbor survivor and friend of Veterans Voices. He will be missed. We want to show you a little clip of Mickey with a former president, and then on his 100th birthday on our show. We are honored to have known him.
The legacy of that legendary American generation is carved deep into the stone monuments of history across the battlefields, oceans, and harrowing skies of Europe and the Pacific throughout the war. One great battle cry could be heard by American friends and foes alike. Remember Pearl Harbor. Have you heard that before a couple of times? Remember Pearl Harbor.
Remember Pearl Harbor as we go to meet the foe. Just remember Pearl Harbor as we did the Alamo. We shall always remember how they died for liberty. Just remember Pearl Harbor and go on to victory.
Yeah. What can I say? Wow, that was good. He's a very shy person, too. And a great football player.
Our first guest tonight is Mickey Ganitch, a Pearl Harbor survivor who has returned to the site many times in the years since World War II. Mickey, welcome to the show.
My honor to be here. My name is Mickey Ganitch. I was born November 18, 1919 in Ohio. I joined the Navy January 21st, 1941. I spent my time in the Navy, and I retired from the Navy October 10th, 1963. In between that time, we had World War II, Korea veteran, and I am just honored to be here because a lot of the people, a lot of friends I knew did not make it. I am honored to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you, Mickey, and you said November 18th, so that would make this your 100th birthday. Is that right, sir?
That's right.
Well, you know what? We got a special surprise for you tonight, Mickey, so happy birthday to you.
Well, thank you.
So we're
very
bringing
much.
out a cake for you.
Oh, wow. Wow.
You get to make a wish.
And look at that. The candle's actually lit there, Mickey. I don't know if the camera can see it, but it's still lit.
I see it.
All right.
Happy birthday, sir.
Happy birthday.
Team Rubicon provides veterans with camaraderie and a continued mission. Find them at teamrubiconusa.org. Team Red, White, and Blue is another great way to get involved while helping your community. You can reach them at teamrwb.org. Wounded Warrior Project is dedicated to helping wounded veterans transition to life in the civilian world. Contact them at woundedwarriorproject.org. There are many organizations that can help veterans combat social isolation. Find our full list on our Facebook page, Veterans Voices 1. Veterans Voices is brought to you in part by contributions from the Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans near you. American Legion Post 246, honoring the tradition of the American Legion in Danville. If you would like to help sponsor Veterans Voices, you can donate through the Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, care of Veterans Voices. Get in touch with them at diabloveterans.org. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week, or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa. So be sure to subscribe. Our next show will air on Monday, June 13th at 7 p.m. We will be talking about service as a pathway to citizenship. You won't want to miss it. To all of our veterans and their families, thank you for serving. To all of you who tuned in tonight, thanks for watching and have a great evening.